The Battle of Tinian was part of the Pacific campaign of World War II. It was fought between the United States and Japan on the island of Tinian in the Mariana Islands from 24 July until 1 August 1944. The battle saw napalm used for the first time. At the Cairo Conference in December 1943, the U.S. and British combined chiefs of staff endorsed a two-pronged attack through the Central Pacific and Southwest Pacific areas. On 12 March 1944, the Commander-in-Chief, Pacific Ocean Areas, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, was directed to neutralize Truk and occupy the Mariana Islands. The Mariana Islands were targeted because of their location astride the Japanese line of communications. Tinian lay too close to Saipan to allow it to be bypassed and remain in Japanese hands. Following the conclusion of the Battle of Saipan on 9 July, Major General Harry Schmidt's V Amphibious Corps began preparations to invade nearby Tinian. The Japanese defending the island were commanded by Colonel Kiichi Ogata, the commander of the 50th Infantry Regiment. This regiment was part of the 5,000 Army troops on the island. There were also about 4,000 Imperial Japanese Navy personnel on Tinian, the main force being the 56th Naval Guard Force, under the command of Captain Goichi Oi. Most of the island was surrounded by coral cliffs, so Ogata concentrated his forces on the southwest of the island, where the best landing beaches were located. Major General Clifton B. Cates's 4th Marine Division landed on Tinian on 24 July 1944, supported by naval bombardment and the guns of the XXIV Corps Artillery, firing across the strait from Saipan. Instead of landing in the southwest, they landed on the northwest coast, where there were two small beaches that were lightly defended. These beaches were flanked by low coral cliffs that the Marines were able to surmount with the aid of ramps mounted on modified amphibious tractors, LVTs. A successful feint in the southwest by Major General Thomas E. Watson's 2nd Marine Division distracted defenders from the actual landing site on the north of the island. The 2nd Marine Division then landed behind the 4th Marine Division. The weather worsened on 28 July, damaging the pontoon causeways and interrupting the unloading of supplies. But on 30 July, the 4th Marine Division occupied Tinian Town and the airfield. Japanese remnants conducted a last stand in the caves and ravines of a limestone ridge on the south portion of the island. Although the island was declared secure on 1 August, mopping up patrols continued into 1945. Tinian became an important base for further U.S. operations in the Pacific. North Field became operational in February 1945 and West Field in March. The Seabees built 6 8,500-foot, 2,600 m runways for the 20th Air Force's Boeing B-29 Superfortress bombers. Bombers based on Tinian took part in the bombing of Tokyo in March 1945, and the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. Background: Map of the battle. Strategy. After World War I, the United States had developed a series of contingency plans for the event of a war with Japan known as the Orange Plans. These envisaged an advance through the Marshall and Caroline Islands to the Philippines, from whence Japan could be blockaded. The Mariana Islands figured only incidentally in the plans, as they lay north of the direct route between Hawaii and the Philippines. 1. During World War II, the islands attracted the attention of naval and air strategists. At the Casablanca Conference in January 1943, the U.S. and British combined chiefs of staff had endorsed an offensive in the Central Pacific along the lines envisaged in the Orange Plans. In his formulation of the strategy, the Commander-in-Chief, United States Fleet, Admiral Ernest J. King II, specifically mentioned the Mariana Islands as the key to the situation because of their location on the Japanese line of communications. The Joint Chiefs of Staff envisaged the Marianas as a naval base. 5. But another rationale for the capture of the Mariana Islands emerged with the development of the long-range Boeing B-29 Superfortress bomber. 6. From the Mariana Islands, the B-29s could reach all the most significant industrial targets in Japan, and they could be supported by sea. 7. The Air Staff planners began incorporating the Mariana Islands into their long-range plans in September 1943. 5. The combined chiefs endorsed this at the Cairo Conference in December, along with a two-pronged offensive, with the Central Pacific Drive in conjunction with one along the north coast of New Guinea. 8. In response, the Commander-in-Chief Pacific Ocean Areas, CINCPOA, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, produced a campaign plan called Operation Granite, which tentatively scheduled the capture of Mariana Islands of Saipan, Tinian, and Guam for November 1944 as the culmination of the Central Pacific Campaign. 9. By February 1944, there was consideration of advancing the Operation Granite timetable by bypassing Truk and heading directly for Palau or the Marianas after the capture of the Marshall Islands. On 7 March, Nimitz and his Deputy Chief of Staff, Rear Admiral Forrest P. Sherman, met with the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Washington, D.C., where they were questioned by the Chief of Staff of the United States Army, General George C. Marshall, and the Chief of Staff to the Commander-in-Chief, Admiral William D. Leahy. Sherman argued that the neutralization of Truk required the occupation of the Mariana Islands to cut the air route to Truk from Japan. On 12 March, the Joint Chiefs of Staff directed Nimitz to neutralize Truk and occupy the Mariana Islands. 10. Tinian was considered a target from the outset. 11-12 Lieutenant General Holland M. Smith's Northern Troops and Landing Force, NTLF, was ordered to land on, seize, occupy, and defend Saipan, then be prepared to seize Tinian on order. 13. The American forces assaulted Saipan on 15 June. 14. The Battle of Saipan lasted until 9 July, when the island was declared secured. The cost was high. 14,111 of the 71,034 NTLF personnel were killed, wounded, or missing in action. Mopping up operations continued until October 15, but preparations began immediately for the attack on Tinian. 16. Plans to capture Tinian were prepared concurrently with those to capture Saipan. 11-13. Tinian lay only 3.5 miles, 5.6 km, from the southern tip of Saipan. 17. And its proximity to Saipan meant that while it remained in Japanese hands, Japanese aircraft could attack Saipan by staging the Tinian. The garrison might raid Saipan. 18, and they could observe ship and aircraft movements on Saipan and communicate them to Tokyo. 19. Tinian also had value in its own right, as its flat terrain made it highly suitable for the development of air bases. There were already airfields that looked promising for development into B-29 airfields. 18. Ushi Point Airfield, Airfield No. 1, was the main airfield. It had a hard-surfaced runway for 750 feet, 1,450 m long. 2 other airfields were in use and another was under construction. 20 Airfield No. 3, which lay immediately south of No. 1, 2122, Airfield No. 2 at Gurguan Point 23, and the unfinished Airfield No. 4 near Tinian Town, 2425. Geography. Along with the other Mariana Islands, Tinian was claimed for Spain by Miguel López de Legazpi in 1565. Guam was seized by the United States in the Spanish-American War, and Spain sold the remaining islands to Germany. They were occupied by Japan during World War I and became part of Japan's South Seas Mandate. 26-27. Tinian lay just 3 + 1 2 miles 10 km from the southern tip of Saipan. 11. It covered about 50 square miles 130 km too, measuring 10 + 1 4 miles 20 km from north to south, and 5 miles 8 km across at its widest point. The terrain was generally low and flat, making it suitable for airfields. There were 2 hills in the north, the 390-foot, 120 m, Mount Maga, and the 564-foot, 172 m, Mount Lasso. There was also a rugged 580-foot, 180 m, limestone hill mass of cliffs and ravines in the south. About 90% of the island, approximately 15,000 acres, 6,000 ha, was covered in sugar cane fields. The square fields gave the island a checkerboard look from the air. Fields were surrounded by drainage ditches or windbreaks of trees or hedgerows. 2028. Oblique photograph of White Beach 1 taken before naval gunfire. Artillery, air and bulldozers altered its appearance. Most of the island was encircled by jagged limestone cliffs that ranged from 6 to 100 feet, 2 to 30 m high. There were only a few beaches, which the Americans designated by colors. 28. The best beaches were around Sunheron Bay in the southeast. Blue Beach, 1 mile 1.6 km south of Tinian town, was 600 yards 550 m long. Green Beach 1, located between the two piers at Tinian town, was also 600 yards 550 m long. Green Beach 2 at the southern end of Tinian town was 400 yards 370 m long. Red Beach 1 and 2 were north of the piers, with a combined width of 825 yards 754 m. And Orange Beach, 1 mile 0.8 km north of Red Beach 1, was 340 yards 310 m long. 29. There were two beaches on the east coast at Asiga Bay. The 355-yard 325 m Yellow Beach 1 and the 200-yard 180 m Yellow Beach 2. These were flanked by cliffs and subject to heavy surf when there was an easterly wind. There were also two small beaches on the northwest coast, the 65 to 75-yard 59 to 69 m White Beach 1 and the 200-yard 180 m White Beach 2. The small size of the white and yellow beaches made them unattractive. A division normally required a landing beach 1,000 yards, 910 m long. 29. Oblique photograph of White Beach 2. There was little seasonal variation in temperature, which ranged from an average of 76 degrees F, 24 degrees C, in January to 80 degrees F, 27 degrees C in June, but the average humidity in those months was 78 and 84%, respectively. Fair weather prevailed during the dry season from November to March, but the wet season from April to November was characterized by frequent rains and occasional typhoons. Sunheron Bay was little more than an anchorage and was unusable in rough weather. 20. According to a 1 January 1944 census, Tinian had a population of 18,000 Japanese civilians, most of whom worked in the sugar cane industry, and 26 ethnic Chamorro people. Most of the original population had been forcibly removed to other islands. The main settlements were Tinian Town in the south and two small villages around Ushi Point Airfield in the north. The former was the administrative center of the island, while the latter housed airfield workers. The primary road network consisted of roads approximately 18 feet, 5.5 m wide and surfaced with crushed coral. They were generally straight, following the edges of the cane fields. Approximately 40 miles, 64 km, of narrow-gauge railways connected the sugar plantations with Tinian Town. 20. Opposing forces and plans. Further information. Battle of Tinian Order of Battle and Central Marianas Naval Order of Battle. Japanese. The senior Japanese officer on Tinian was Vice Admiral Kakuji Kakuta, the commander of 1st Air Fleet. His headquarters was in Manila, but he was on Tinian on an inspection tour when U.S. aerial operations in the Marianas Islands began on 11 June and became cut off. He exercised no command authority over the Army troops on the island, and the naval troops were not subject to his direct command. 30. Japanese defense sectors and dispositions of major units. The Imperial Japanese Army force defending the island was the 50th Infantry Regiment, commanded by Colonel Kiichi Agata. This was part of the 29th Division, all the rest of which was located on Guam. The regiment was formerly based at Mukden in China and had moved to Tinian in March 1944. It had 3 infantry battalions, a mountain artillery battalion with 1275 guns, an anti-tank company with 637 anti-tank guns, and a company of the 18th Infantry Regiment with 12 light tanks. The 1st Battalion, 135th Infantry Regiment, under the command of Captain Bunzo Izumi, part of the 43rd Division. It had been formed in Nagoya in July 1943. It was normally based on Saipan, but was conducting amphibious landing exercises on Tinian on 11 June and became cut off when Saipan was invaded. It provided a 4th Infantry Battalion that Agata incorporated into the island's defense, 130-233. The Army forces on Tinian totaled about 5,000 men. 34 most were well-trained combat veterans with prior combat experience in the war in China. They were skilled in camouflage and the use of their weapons. 35-36. They were well-equipped, in many cases with new weapons. 37. And their morale was high. 38. The main Imperial Japanese Navy force on Tinian was the 56th Naval Guard Force, Keibatai, under the command of Captain Goichi Oi. He accepted Agata as the commander on Tinian, but to avoid embarrassment, he did not inform his subordinates that their orders came from an army officer. 39. His force of 1,400 troops and 600 laborers was equipped with 3 6-inch and 10 140 coast defense guns, and 10 120 and 4 76.2 general-purpose guns, 24 25 and 6 7 cm anti-aircraft guns, and 3 12 cm dual-purpose guns. Along with airfield construction crews, flight technicians, and staff, there were about 4,000 sailors of various units on Tinian. 3140. Most of the naval personnel had some training as infantry. 35. In addition, there were 3 civilian defense organizations of little military value: the Civilian Militia, the Home Guard Organization and Youth Organization, and about 60 comfort women, none of whom survived the battle. 39. After Saipan had fallen on 9 July, the prospects for the garrison of Tinian were grim. 41. Agata expected that Tinian would be the next target, and on 25 June he issued an operational order that announced, "The enemy on Saipan can be expected to be planning a landing on Tinian. The area of that landing is estimated to be either Tinian Harbor or Asiga, Northeast Coast Harbor." 38. He adhered to the Japanese doctrine of defense against amphibious attacks at the water's edge. 42. Each of the sector commanders was ordered to be prepared to destroy the enemy at the beach, but be prepared to shift 2/3 of the force elsewhere. Agata was aided by the geography of Tinian, which limited the possible landing sites. He positioned the 3rd Battalion, 50th Infantry Regiment, and most of the heavy weapons of the 56th Naval Guard Force around Sunharan Bay beaches. The northern sector around Asiga Bay was covered by the 2nd Battalion, 50th Infantry Regiment. He did not expect anything more than a raid on the beaches in the west, so this was assigned to the 3rd Company, 1st Battalion, 50th Infantry Regiment. The rest of the 1st Battalion was dug in around Mount Lasso. The 1st Battalion, 135th Infantry Regiment formed a mobile counterattack force, along with the tanks, and a mobile artillery contingent of 12 Type 94-75 mountain guns. The reserve was positioned so as to quickly reach either the Sunharan Bay or Asiga Bay, depending on where the Americans made their main effort. 42-44. United States. Senior U.S. commanders on Tinian. Left to right. Rear Admiral Harry W. Hill, Major General Harry Schmidt, Admiral Raymond A. Spruance, Lieutenant General Holland M. Smith, Vice Admiral Richmond K. Turner, Major General Thomas E. Watson, and Major General Clifton B. Cates. The American forces were part of Admiral Raymond A. Spruance's 5th Fleet. The Joint Amphibious Forces, Task Force 51, were led by Vice Admiral Richmond K. Turner, and the Expeditionary Troops, Task Force 56, by Lieutenant General Holland M. Smith. 45. For the Battle of Saipan, Turner had concurrently commanded the Landing Force, Task Force 52, and Smith had also commanded the NTLF and V amphibious corps. But with simultaneous operations on Guam and Prospect, it was desirable for these roles to be separated. On 12 July, Smith became the commander of the newly established Fleet Marine Force, Pacific, and handed over command of the V Amphibious Corps and NTLF, Task Group 56.1, to Major General Harry Schmidt. Command of the amphibious forces in the Tinian operation, Task Force 52, was entrusted to Turner's former deputy, Rear Admiral Harry W. Hill, on 15 July. Although Turner and Smith remained in command of Task Forces 51 and 56 respectively, they sailed for Guam on 20 July, leaving the operation entirely in the hands of Hill and Schmidt, 46-47. For the Tinian operation, the V Amphibious Corps had the 2nd Marine Division, commanded by Major General Thomas E. Watson, and the 4th Marine Division, which was commanded by Major General Clifton B. Cates, who had succeeded Schmidt. Both had seen service earlier in the Pacific War. The 2nd Marine Division on Guadalcanal and Tarawa, and the 4th Marine Division in the Battle of Kwajalein, 48, and had participated in the recent fighting on Saipan, where they had incurred 6,170 and 6,612 battle casualties respectively. 49, they had absorbed a single replacement draft of 1,268 men, before the fighting began again on Tinian, 46, but remained under strength. And much of their equipment had been worn out through combat and hard use, 49. The V Amphibious Corps had the support of Brigadier General Arthur M. Harper's XXIV Corps Artillery, with its 2 battalions of 155 guns and 2 battalions of 155 howitzers, 50. For the Tinian operation, Harper also had command of the 4 battalions of the 27th Infantry Division Artillery and 5 Marine Corps 105 howitzer battalions, 2 each from the 2 Marine Divisions and 1 from the V Amphibious Corps. For a total of 13 battalions, 51, each of which had 12 guns or howitzers, 52. The rest of the 27th Infantry Division, except for the 105th Infantry, was in reserve, but on 4 hours' notice to embark for Tinian, 51. Japanese fixed gun positions on Tinian. American intelligence about Tinian and the Japanese defenses there was excellent, 53. The Joint Intelligence Center Pacific Ocean Area, JICPOA, under the command of Brigadier General Joseph J. Twitty, assembled intelligence obtained from imagery intelligence, human intelligence, and reference information, backed up by ultra-intelligence derived from code breaking and signals intelligence. 54 JICPOA produced a report on Tinian's hydrography and geography on 10 May 1944 that also detailed the locations of many of the defenses and issued a series of topographic maps. A series of oblique aerial photographs were taken of Tinian's beaches. The headquarters of the Japanese 31st Army on Saipan was overrun in mid-June, and captured documents provided a full order of battle of the Japanese forces on Tinian. 53. The Americans estimated the strength of the Japanese garrison as 8,039, which was quite accurate. 55. The XXIV Corps Artillery began bombarding Tinian on 20 June, even as the fighting on Saipan continued. And its Saipan-based observation aircraft conducted daily flights over Tinian. 11. The intelligence reports revealed that the best landing beaches were around Sunharan Bay, but they were also the most heavily defended. The staff of the 4th Marine Division, particularly the plans officer, Lieutenant Colonel Evans F. Carlson, preferred to land in the north, where the beaches were poorer but the defenses were weaker and tactical surprise could be attained. Independently, Hill's staff arrived at the same conclusion. 56-57. Turner was not convinced. "If we go ashore at Tinian Town," Smith told him, "we'll have another Tarawa, sure as hell. The Japs will murder us. What's more, we probably will be repulsed, and that will upset our entire timetable. What do you say to that?" 58. The low cliffs between the 2 white beaches. Turner noted that the Sunharan Bay beaches had good gradients and inland approaches, that there was a protected harbor for small craft, and facilities for unloading supplies. Whereas the northern beaches were too small to land and support a force of the size contemplated, and were exposed to the weather, so if it turned bad the movement of supplies from Saipan could be obstructed or halted. An advance from north to south would likely take longer than one from east to west, and while artillery support from Saipan would be available in the early stages, unfavorable weather could prevent it being moved to Tinian to cover the advance once it moved further south. 56-57. In view of these objections, Schmidt ordered a reconnaissance of the Yellow and White beaches. On the night of 10-11 July, Companies A and B of Captain James L. Jones's V Amphibious Corps Amphibious Reconnaissance Battalion and underwater demolition teams 5 and 7 set out in the high-speed transports USS Gilmer and Stringham. They were launched in rubber boats and paddled to within 500 yards, 460 m of the shore, then swam the rest of the way. The underwater demolition teams investigated the offshore reefs while the Marines swam ashore and studied the beaches. Yellow Beach 1 was found to be strung with a double apron wire obstacle, with cliffs to the south that were 20 to 25 feet, 6.1 to 7.6 m, high, and unscalable without ladders or cargo nets. 59-60-61. Marines load supplies aboard 2 LSDs in preparation for the assault on Tinian. A strong current was encountered by the groups sent to reconnoiter the White Beaches, and the rubber boats wound up too far north. Consequently, the reconnaissance of White Beach 1 was carried out by the group intended to land on White Beach 2, and that of White Beach 2 had to be carried out the following night. They found that although White Beach 1 was only 60 yards, 55 m long, the cliffs for 150 yards, 140 m, on either side were only 6 to 10 feet, 1.8 to 3 m high with small breaks, and could be negotiated by infantry without ladders or nets. Only the central 70 yards, 64 m, of White Beach 2 could be reached by amphibian vehicles. Both White Beaches had gentle grades, and it was possible for LCVPs to land on the reef 50 yards, 46 m, from the beach, and for infantry to wade ashore from there. 59-60-62. With this information in hand, a conference was held on board Turner's flagship, the USS Rocky Mount, on 12 July. Schmidt made the case for a landing on the White Beaches, citing 6 factors. 1. That a landing at Sunharan Bay would be too costly. 2. That the XXIV Corps artillery could cover the beaches from Saipan. 3. The airfield at Ushi Point could be quickly captured and utilized. 4. Tactical surprise could be attained. 5. The whole operation could be conducted from Saipan as a shore-to-shore movement. And 6. Supplies could be preloaded on vehicles and driven straight to dumps, thereby avoiding congestion on the beaches. 59-63. Spruance called for a vote in order of seniority, and Watson, Schmidt, Hill, and Smith voted for the White Beach Plan. To Spruance's relief, Turner agreed to make the decision unanimous. 64. On 20 July, Spruance confirmed the day of the assault, J-Day or Jig Day, using the phonetic alphabet of the time, as 24 July. Hill then chose 7:30 as H hour. 65. Battle. Bombardment. USS Iowa fires a salvo from number 216 turret during the bombardment of Tinian on 14-15 June. Artillery bombardment of Tinian commenced on 20 June when Battery B of the 531st Field Artillery Battalion began shelling targets on Tinian with its 155 Long Tom guns. In the days leading up to the landing, the XXIV Corps Artillery used 24,536 rounds on 1,509 counter-battery fire, harassing fire and area bombardment missions. 66. The XXIV Corps Artillery had its own observation aircraft, 9 Piper L-4 Grasshoppers based at Aslido Field on Saipan. One was forced to ditch off Tinian Town on 28 July due to engine failure. The crew was rescued by the cruiser USS Louisville, but the aircraft was lost. Another was forced down by Japanese fire the following day, but landed safely behind American lines. 67-68. The Marine artillery had the support of the Stinson OY Sentinel observation aircraft of VMO-2 and VMO-4. 69. The U.S. naval bombardment commenced on 13 June, with the fire support ships of Task Force 52 engaging targets on Tinian that could interfere with operations on Saipan. On 25 June, the destroyer escort USS Eldon and destroyer USS Bancroft detected Japanese barges attempting to leave Sunharan Harbor and destroyed them. The bombardment was stepped up on 26 June, when the cruisers USS Indianapolis, Birmingham, and Montpelier began a week of systematic attacks. On 23 July, the day before the landing, 3 battleships, 5 cruisers, and 16 destroyers participated in the bombardment. 70. The battleship USS Colorado engaged the 3 140mm coast defense guns at Phoebus San Hilo Point, which could enfilade the white beaches from defilade of the artillery on Saipan. 60 16-inch shells completely destroyed the battery. 71. Meanwhile, the battleships USS Tennessee and California fired 480 14-inch and 805-inch rounds into Tinian town, reducing it to rubble. 71. TBM, Avenger bombers prepare to take off from the USS Monterey to attack targets on Tinian. The bombardment lifted for 3 periods of 40 to 60 minutes to allow for aerial bombardment. At least 200 sorties were flown from the aircraft carriers USS Essex and Langley, and another 50 or more from the escort carriers USS Gambier Bay and Kitcun Bay. Aslido Field-Based Army Air Force Republic P-47 Thunderbolts of the 318th Fighter Group flew more than 100 sorties. 71. The group's 19th Fighter Squadron had arrived on Saipan on 22 June after being catapulted from the escort carriers USS Manila Bay and Natoma Bay, and had flown its first mission over Tinian that day. 72. Attempts by destroyers to burn wooded areas with white phosphorus and thermite on 18 and 19 July failed due to the wet foliage, so napalm was tried for the first time. The 318th Fighter Group flew 18 napalm sorties, but results were inconclusive, as the best mixture had not yet been devised, but it had some success setting the cane fields alight. 66. On J-Day, 24 July, a feint was made to distract the defenders from the actual landing site. 73. This was carried out by the 2nd and 8th Marines of the 2nd Marine Division. The attack transports USS Calvert, Fuller, Haywood, J. Franklin Bell, and Knox, and troopships John Land and Winged Arrow took them to a point about 4 miles, 6.4 km, offshore from Tinian town, where they boarded landing craft using cargo nets, and then climbed back again. The empty landing craft then made a run for the shore until Japanese shore batteries started firing at them. The landing craft regrouped and made a second run, but turned back again 400 yards, 370 m from the beach. Around 10:00, the transports recovered the landing craft and headed for the transport area off the white beaches. 74. While covering the feint, Colorado and the destroyer Norman Scott were hit by the 3 Japanese 6-inch guns, which were concealed in caves 3,500 yards, 3,200 m, southwest of the Tinian town pier. Colorado was hit 22 times, killing 43 men and wounding 198. Norman Scott was hit 6 times, killing the captain, Commander Seymour Owens, and 18 of his men and wounding 47.